What's up everyone, I'm MarkHawk, and today we're taking the GoPro Hero4 Black, the GoPro Hero4 Silver, and the new GoPro Hero, which is a more basic end model from 2014, up in a helicopter, and we're flying all around Los Angeles, Hollywood, Malibu. It's going to be pretty rad. We're going to expose these cameras to a lot of vibration, we're going to have a lot of aerial shots, and we're just going to see how each of these cameras performs from day to evening to night. Now, as you can see here, we're flying around downtown Los Angeles right now in 4K. Everything is looking great. The only issue with the Hero4 Black is that I have a slight smudge on the bottom center of the screen, so it's going to have a tendency to just wash out that area, but I still think a lot of the footage from the Hero4 Black in this flight is super useful, and a lot of it's super rad, so we'll just kind of try and overlook that, and I'll try and point it out when I think it's kind of an issue. The GoPro Hero4 Black Edition is capable of filming in 4K, 30 frames per second, which a lot of you guys already know. The GoPro Hero Silver is capable of filming at 2.7K, 30 frames per second. And the GoPro Hero Basic is capable at 1080p, 30 frames per second. That's their sort of max resolution at 30 frames per second. Each of these cameras can go up to higher frame rates, such as the GoPro Hero4 Black Edition being able to do 120 frames a second, while the GoPro Hero Basic can do up to 60 frames a second. As we zoom in to what is 100% here on the 4 Black, you'll notice the skyscraper looks super crisp. The Hero Silver is not too far behind it, and the Hero Basic is kind of smudgy, especially if you're looking at the cars on the ground compared to the Hero 4 Black. There's just a big quality difference between those two cameras. Some of these shots are awesome. Like, I love how this ended up looking as the sun was setting on the city. It just looks really cool. And we have that smudge on the Hero 4 Black, but just try and overlook it for the most part now. Fortunately, I couldn't get rid of it in post and without affecting the video quality too much. And now we have the Hero 4 Silver on the left and the Hero Basic on the right. So you'll notice these are all filming with the GoPro color grade, and the Hero Basic basically only has one color grade. You can't change its color profile. As we start to spin around Dodger Stadium, we have all three cameras set in their respective 100% scale. So you can basically get a good idea of what the size difference is from these three resolutions right away. Just by going up to 100%, we have so much more of Dodger Stadium in frame compared to the Hero Basic at 100%. It's so much smaller. And the strobing you guys are seeing when we're doing that turn is actually from the sunlight hitting the propeller blades and then sort of strobing into the lens. Not actually something in the camera. And we're going to hop into the cockpit here for a second, and right now we're filming at 4K on the Hero 4 Black, 2.7K on the Hero 4 Silver, and 1080p on the Hero Basic. And we're getting a nice range of color and quality and stuff like that, but all three of these cameras offer Super View now, which takes advantage of the full 4x3 sensor. And as you can see here, we're getting much more of the cockpit now. You can see my pilot Mike, who's over at Rotor FX, who kind of flew us around for the day. You get much more of the cockpit with Super View because it's taking the full use of the sensor. So it's taking the top and the bottom parts that are normally cut off, and it's sort of squishing them and distorting them into frame. That way we can be in a more immersive area. And it's great for these small areas just because we can see so much more. And I'm a little distorted. You can see my face is a little crunched and stuff like that. I kind of look like more circular than oval with my head, but the results can be really cool for just tight spots like this. I'm going to start spinning back around the city, but this time we're going to be doing it at a much higher frame rate on each camera. Now with the Hero 4 Black, we can actually go up to 120 frames per second at 1080p, while the Hero Basic will give us up to 720p at 60 frames a second, and the Hero Silver will do 1080p at 60 frames a second. So what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to slow down the footage, and in this scenario it's going to be very useful because when we slow it down to 50% here, we're actually smoothing out the plate. Since we're moving at a much slower pace and time, the camera doesn't appear to be jittering as high frequency as it's been. So that's a huge advantage to us. So we have the Hero 4 Black now is basically playing at 60 frames a second since we slowed it down by 50%, while the Hero 4 Silver and Basic are basically playing back at 30 frames per second at 50%. As we zoom in here, you can see it feels like a nice smooth pan. Now, it's not as steady as, let's say, something on a gimbal would be. If you had a gimbal, your results would be way better. but we're just sort of hand holding this in the side of a chopper with no door, so you can imagine how much shake is there. But just slowing it down by 50% is great. But if we slow it down to 25% here, the Hero Black is now basically playing at 30 frames per second. We're going 4 times as slow, and we just sort of have this nice, epic, establishing shot. It's a really good way to open up one of your edits, just a shot like this. Again, the Hero4 Silver and the Hero Basic now are basically playing at 15 frames a second, which is why it seems so jittery. Now we're going to fly out to the coast of Malibu, and as we do this, we're going to fly into the sunset here at, again, 1080p, 120 frames per second, and with the Hero4 Silver, 60 frames a second, and the Hero Basic, 60 frames a second. So with the Hero Basic, we're basically having to scale up a little bit to fit the frame, but if you look at like the cockpit instruments and stuff like that, you can get an idea on how sharp they are. We're getting a good idea of how each camera is handling looking into the sun, so we can look at the color profiles a little different. You can definitely notice the Hero4 Silver has these nice sort of purples and sort of reds and just a much nicer sort of warmer color tone. So before I mentioned when we were looking at SuperView how the camera was taking full advantage of the entire sensor. Now that's what 1440p is doing when we film. It's giving us extra field of view at the top and bottom of our frame so we get more information. Now this is great when you're filming on a trail or in these tight environments because you never aim the camera accidentally too low or too high. And unlike SuperView, it's not distorting it from us, and we can kind of decide later if we just want to scale up or scale down, or position up and position down, how we want the full frame to look in the end. And again, we're still at 1440p here, and as we scale up, we can kind of see the level of detail on each parts of the instruments and the cockpit. The ocean's still nice and crisp, and all 3 pictures basically have the same color tone, but the Hero Basic has a little bit of a green tint to it, and the blacks are being crunched out, so we're losing a lot of the cockpit detail. As we're landing on the ocean here, that Hero4 Black smudge is kind of messing with us, but just take a look at the ocean waves and how the black levels are sort of holding up and stuff like that. The Hero4 in this scene looks friggin' awesome. The way the color profile is being handled, the ocean looks nice and blue, but it has this nice little red tint, while the Hero4 Basic has this sort of weird greenish tint, and it's kind of muddy and artifacty. And then we'll do this little fun shot. That's a blast. But it's really just a setup for this shot, because we're going to take a look at the ocean again where it's all nice and blue. I'm going to point out a few seals to you, which are pretty much impossible to see. You can see all the foam crashing on the rocks. Looks awesome on the Hero4 Silver. Again, that black smudge is kind of ruining some of that detail, but as we pull away here, you can kind of see a lot of it. So as we move away from Malibu, we're going to be going back along the coast. We're going to start at around 40 miles per hour and work our way up to around 80, 90 miles per hour. And you're just going to see how well these cameras are holding up, even at these fast speeds. Again, the Hero4 Black looks fantastic. So we're going to put it up against the Hero Basic here on the right, and you can just get a kind of a sense of what the level of detail is in the ocean and stuff like that, and these cliff sides going at 80 miles per hour. Honestly, it feels like we're going like 25 miles per hour, but we're booking it pretty fast along the coast here. All the ocean waves look awesome and stuff like that. And flying through the suburbs here, we're starting to lose light a little bit, so we're kind of getting to that evening space. Hero Basic is holding up fairly well. There's still a lot of range of information there. Even though the sun has set in our last video, it all went completely black. Here's doing a really good job of keeping that exposed. We're flying over the 405 here, which is probably the greatest feeling if you're on the West Coast and you understand that. The 405 is like the worst freeway here, so being able to just fly over it, and it looks awesome actually. But then look at all that grass. And we're doing a 4K here when we do these flybys, so everything looks great. It's just a really awesome shot. I really like how that one turned out. Just all the cockpit information. Mike here just looking around. Oh, okay, so now we're moving into downtown LA. Completely at night. All of this stuff looks gorgeous. Especially when you shrink it down like this. As we zoom it up here, it's going to get a little more grainy, but these shots look fantastic. We're going to put together a huge 4K reel, and a lot of this stuff is going to be in there. But anyway, we'll start with the Hero4 Black at 4K. We're spinning around. Again, we have our smudge, but this one won't get in the way as much. Just the colors and the range of lights and stuff like that, and just how all the shadows are being handled and stuff like that looks awesome. Hero4 Silver is knocking it out of the park too, but the best thing about the Hero4 Silver is how it's handling the grain. Now we could go into the Hero4 Black and mess with some settings, and we're going to do that in the future. We're going to find out what the best settings are for low light conditions, because right now I'm pretty convinced I don't have it at the best settings. And the Hero Basic, again, very, very muddy, but it's not crunching everything down. We still have a lot of range here. It's a little soft and stuff like that, but I can see detail, and that's really the most important part. And when you put all three of these cameras side by side like this, you can see like the black levels are a little darker on the black, but there's still a lot of information there, especially when you compare it to the Hero4 Black. It's not that big of a difference, and that's going to change real soon, but just for now, just enjoy the view. You can just see just how much crisper the 4K is, especially when we're zooming into about 100% or 200 on the Hero Basic. It's just the level of details in the cars driving by and stuff like that, the street lights, the window lights. It looks awesome. Like, I just love how all of this turned out in 4K. I just wish the Hero4 Black was a little less grainy, but again, I really think we can dial in those settings in a future video and find something that's really sweet. When we zoom in like this, if you look at the sky especially, you can notice that the Hero4 Silver's level of degraining and compression, it's definitely doing something better than the Hero4 Black is currently. But if you look at the Hero4 Black, even with the smudge, those cars on the ground just look super crisp. The windows, again, just can't say enough how awesome I thought this all was. And now we're putting the Hero4 up against the Hero Basic. Again, it's not really a fair comparison. It's a $400 camera against a $100 camera, but it's just kind of a good jump in quality difference to see like where the Hero Basic comes from, which is closer to a Hero 1 HD than it is a Hero 3 White. But you can just kind of see how far we've come kind of in the 2 or 3 year span. However, the Hero Basics software is way better. Now we're kind of going into much lower light conditions, but we've also switched from 4K 30 frames a second to 1080p at 120 frames a second on the Black. The Silver's at 60 and the Hero Basics at 720/60. So again, we're getting this awesome range in the Hero4 Black and the Hero4 Silver. Hero Basic now is starting to take a hit. It's crunching everything down. We're losing a lot of information. Now, initially, when this all started to be very stuttery, I thought it was something in my playback. So when I went back and checked the settings, when I'm slowing it down by 50% here, it gets very stuttery, and I didn't have the settings at auto low light mode, which would have scaled the frame rate down to 30 frames per second, but that kind of looks like what's happening here, but I'm not sure what 100% is happening here. We zoom in here, we're going to be seeing like we're in very low light conditions now, so the Hero4 Black is gaining up quite a bit, and again, that's something we can go into now with ProTune turned on and limit the ISO. That way it's not as grainy. However, our image will get darker as we mess with that ISO. So initially I had this scene playing back at 25%, so it should have been playing at 30 frames per second from 120 frames per second, but again, it feels like it filmed at 30 frames per second, and then somehow the camera information is telling me it filmed at 120 frames per second, because when I slow it down, it's just way too stuttery to be 30 frames a second. Unfortunately, we don't get any smooth downtown LA slow motion shots at night. I'll just do one last spin around the Staples Center here, which is really great because unlike most of the city, it deals with a lot of blue and purple lights, which kind of helps it pop out and stuff like that. And as you can see, the Hero4 Black again, just killing it with its range. The Silver, super smooth, not grainy at all. I didn't have to do anything to make that image look great. It's just not as sharp, and then the Hero Basic, unfortunately, kind of doesn't hold up too well with the low light. Anyway guys, that just about wraps things up here. If you guys wanted a more in-depth visual comparison that compares things like the differences in 4K quality compared to when you drop it down to 120 frames a second, what kind of quality differences you'll have underwater, what some of your low light settings should be, check out our in-depth visual comparison. It's a much more thorough guide to the quality differences between these three cameras. If you guys are looking for gear ideas this holiday season, check out our gear playlist. There's going to be a ton of little items we're covering for GoPro cameras, other cameras. Just check that out. And one last big thanks to Michael and the guys over at Rotor FX. If you guys are looking for a helicopter tour that's very accommodating to GoPros. Definitely highly recommend those guys. And if I've helped you guys out today, if you guys can consider making a donation or a tip to help me buy more cameras. But I don't have any of that set up for the month of October, and it's actually going to redirect you to a donation page for a friend of mine who was recently struck by a car, and he's kind of battling with a bunch of medical bills. Really awesome guy. You've actually probably seen a bunch of his videos on YouTube, so check that out. Guys, really appreciate the support, and thanks for stopping by. I'll see you guys out there.